Please help me give a warm Rotary welcome to our speaker, author, and friend, Robbie Bach.
Good evening, everybody. I want to thank Marshall and Brian for inviting me and for that very nice introduction. I have to start with an admission. I feel a bit guilty and unprepared tonight. Because usually when I go to talk, if I'm talking at a university or even at a civic organization or at a corporate function, I feel like I have some evangelization to do. Because I come to talk about civics, and I come to talk about doing things in the community. And here I am at a Rotary dinner to talk to you about civics, and that's all you do. So I feel honored and humbled to have an opportunity to share a few thoughts about civic engagement with you. And I think you'll find that what I have to say applies in civics, it applies in business, and hopefully it applies in life as well. Let me start by reflecting on the fact that I think we are in a time of great change in our country. A time of great turmoil in our country and, in fact, in the world. And I'm just a small bit of a historian, history buff, and I think of times like 1865. I think of times like 1932. I think of times like 1954. I think of times like 1968. Times of change and turmoil and consternation and struggle in our country. And I believe that 2016, and now 2017, will go down as one of those times that historians remember as a time of turmoil and change in the country. Now, on the one hand, change and turmoil like that can be very disconcerting. It's scary. And on the other hand, the way I think about it, coming from my background, I think of change as a time for opportunity. And so my premise for you tonight is to talk about how we take turmoil and change and turn it into opportunity. And I'll focus a little bit on how we do that in civics, but as I said, I think the same applies for turmoil in business, and the same applies for times of change in your personal lives. So let me start by talking very quickly about the Xbox business. Because to me, at the foundation of dealing with change and dealing with turmoil is strategy. And having a clear strategic focus on what you're trying to accomplish. I started the Xbox business as the chief Xbox officer, and for 18 months, I proved to be a completely incompetent leader. And that's just the honest reflection of the truth. And we built a business that in its first 4 years lost, and this is real accounting, somewhere between $5 and $7 billion. Like I said, I wasn't a very good leader. Now, on the one hand, though, you would say, well, the business did get 25% market share in the market, and we had some success, but $5 to $7 billion says you have a problem. And the problem started right here. And so we concluded that the thing we needed to do was take control of our strategy, and that we had been running the business without a strategy foundation. And when you do that, you can't build teams, you can't make decisions effectively, and you can't do the right thing. And so we created this process, which I call the 3P framework. And the basic premise is the following. If you have an issue, if you're trying to deal with change, if you're trying to make something happen in your community, can you in 3 pages, or 3 PowerPoint slides if you prefer the shorthand, can you tell me the purpose of what you're trying to accomplish, the principles you're going to use to accomplish it, and the priorities you're going to pursue? 3 Ps. Purpose, principles, priorities. Purpose is 1 sentence. Can you take your problem and turn it into a 1-sentence statement? Microsoft had this sentence when it was formed in 1975. A computer on every desk and in every home running Microsoft software. Microsoft ran the company on that purpose statement for 25 years. And the company only started to struggle when we felt like we'd gotten to that North Star and didn't know where to go next. Purpose is at the heart of getting people rallied around a cause and understanding what you're trying to accomplish. And so I do think about it as a North Star. And if you can write your North Star crisply, you have a chance to get people to follow you. Principles then are the way you work together. The Xbox team I ran was a collection of brilliant people. Some of the smartest people I've ever worked with, way smarter than me. And it was the most dysfunctional team you could possibly imagine, right? If you can imagine the worst in professional sports, we were 10 times worse than that. And the team just could not come together. And the reason it couldn't come together is because we didn't agree on principles. We hired in 18 months 2,000 people. And when you hire 2,000 people in 18 months and you don't tell them how to act, they don't know how to work together. And so principles are the rules of the road. And they're simple statements. You only get 5 of them. Tell me 5 principles for how you're going to operate and work. You have a purpose and a North Star. You have principles under which you can operate. And then the final thing is you establish priorities. This is in some ways the hardest thing because it really means you have to do something very important, and that's say no to a bunch of things. And the hardest problem we had on Xbox is we had 15 things we wanted to do, so we had no priorities. In our second version of that product, we said there's 5 things that matter and only 5 things. And you'd be shocked. We had a lot of arguments about which 5 things. But once we picked 5, you'd be shocked at how liberating it was for people on the team. And they said, oh my gosh, all this stuff I don't have to worry about. Let me just go make sure the 5 important things happen. And the amazing thing is when you get the 5 most important things done, the rest does not matter. And getting yourself to believe that and act on it is really hard. But when you start with a clear North Star of purpose, and you establish principles for how the team's going to work, and you get these priorities in place, suddenly you don't have to be a great manager because the team takes care of itself. Suddenly I wasn't making every decision. In fact, people were trying to keep me from making decisions. And suddenly there was the ability for the team to bring out the brilliance that I talked about and to do it in a way that was multiplicative, not divisive. That second version of Xbox is the product you know of as Xbox 360. Our first version, the original Xbox, sold about 23 million units. Xbox 360, before Microsoft retired it 2 years ago, sold over 80 million units. Market share went from 20+% to 45%. Outside of Japan, it was the #1 selling console in its generation. And it made the company billions of dollars. And I won't tell you that having this 3P strategy was the sole thing, because it wasn't. But it was a huge uniting force for the team. And it made us powerful in what we were trying to do. And if you want to take change, if you want to look at the civic problems we have in our communities, if you want to look at the challenges we have in Tallahassee and in Washington, D.C., you have to have power to do that. You got to have focus. You have to have principles. You have to know what you want to accomplish, and you have to drive it effectively. So that's my first point about driving change, 3P framework and strategy. The second thing I will say is that driving change requires absolute leadership. And when I talk about leadership, there's lots of books about leadership, and I give talks to MBA classes, and I say, hey, you've had a leadership class. I'm not going to talk to you about anything that's in your class. I'm going to talk to you about comic books and the Avengers. So my theory of leadership is really simple. Everybody in this room has leadership talent. Every single one of you. And the challenge for you is figuring out what your leadership superpower is. So in the Avengers analogy, are you like Iron Man and you're the smart person? Or are you like Captain America and you're strong and patriotic? Or are you the Hulk where you can just pound on people? Are you Hawkeye where you can magically shoot arrows that explode and do amazing things? Are you Black Widow who's super stealthy? And if you're Thor and you got the magic hammer, you're good because the magic hammer fixes everything, right? So you got to know what your superpower is. And you have to deeply understand that superpower in order to be effective. And for me, that first experience on Xbox, I didn't know what my superpowers were. And when we went after the second version of the product, I said, there's things I'm bad at and there's things I'm good at. Let me focus on the things I'm good at. Let me use my superpowers to the benefit of the team. Let me let other people take care of that. Which brings me to the second part of my comic book comparison. And for those of you who like comic books, I'm going to do something very bad, which is I'm going to mix Marvel comics with DC comics. And I know that's really bad. I know. My apologies in advance. But on the leadership side, not only do you have to know your Avenger superpower, but you have to know your Superman kryptonite. You have to know the things that you are not good at. Here's how little I thought about myself as a leader. I really had not focused on the fact that I was trying to lead the Xbox. I don't play video games. I don't like video games. I have never taken any technical training at all in my life. I had one class in programming at the University of North Carolina. It was on punch cards. The computer system broke halfway through the semester. We did not finish. So there are deep kryptonites in my leadership skill to run a business the scale of Xbox. And in the second version of that product, I got people behind me and working with me who were great technically, who understood video games and respected the superpowers I had and let me lead, and then did what they did best. And when you can combine the idea that you have superpowers and that you understand your kryptonite, now you can lead. Now you can take the strategy that we talked about first, turn that into a leadership skill, and transform that into something really amazing. Let me close with one last idea about driving change. And this is the importance of culture. And I didn't understand this at all when I started working on Xbox. And we had I don't even want to discuss the culture we had for the first 3 or 4 years. It was really bad. It just wasn't healthy, wasn't constructive. But ultimately, I decided we had to drive culture. And how do you drive culture? It's not slogans, it's not signs, it's not a list of things. It's behavior. It's what you do. And people on your teams, if you want to drive culture and get something done, it's how you act and what you do every day. And the people on your teams are so good at understanding culture. They see it, they have this innate ability to perceive what's right and wrong and what's acceptable based on the way you as a leader act. And if you want to change culture, you have to share a part of yourself and show yourself as being human and to show yourself as modeling the behavior you want. So, to quickly show you how that works, we were at a point where we had to prove to people we were going to win. And I needed the team, despite the fact that we were in the dumps and had just lost $5 to $7 billion, to know that they could win. And so I got the group together and I told them the following story, which I will shorten for your benefit, but I think we'll get the point across. And this is a true story. When I was 13 years old, I was an athlete. I played 6 sports. I come from a very athletic family. I love sports, but I had a problem when I was 13 years old. I grew 8 inches in 1 year. The math is really bad, right? And this was in the 70s. Think bell-bottom plaid high waters. It's not a very good look. So, but the real problem with the growth was I developed a condition called kyphosis. How many people in the audience know what scoliosis is? Yeah, okay. So scoliosis, sideways curvature of the spine. I had a 40-degree forward curve in my spine. And I had the good fortune of living in the town where the world's renowned expert on treating scoliosis and kyphosis lived. It's a man named Dr. Walter Blount. He was 73 years old, had Parkinson's disease, and I was his last patient. So how does he treat me for kyphosis? I get a leather girdle around my waist. I have a metal bar in the front. I have 2 metal bars in the back and a ring around my neck with a little pad here. And I wore that for between 20 and 23 hours a day for 5 years. And to this day, I have no back problems. My back is perfect. I have a 9-degree curve in my spine, which is actually slightly less than normal. But here's the thing it taught me. Because I stopped playing sports when I put that brace on. And my mom, God bless her, said, you need to go start playing tennis again. And I learned to play tennis in the back brace. And I was a nationally ranked tennis player in the back brace and went on to play tennis at the University of North Carolina. And my point to the team in sharing that story was I hate losing. And I am not going to lose, and this is going to be a team of winners, and we are going to have a culture of winning, and we're going to make that happen. And when you can use your personal stories to shape culture and combine that with great strategy and understanding your leadership strengths and weaknesses, you can, in fact, change the world. And you can, in fact, take the problems we have as deep and as hard as they are today and attack them and fix it. And so my hope for you tonight is that you'll think about strategy a bit. You'll think about your leadership skills a bit. You'll think about the culture of the groups you work with. Think about the cultures of your clubs and your organizations. And you'll look at the civic issues you have in your local communities, in the state of Florida, across the country, and say, what more can we do? Rotarians do so much, so it's a little unfair for me to ask for more, but in fact, we need more. And my personal purpose statement is to inspire and arm an army of civic engineers. That's what I live for and try to do. And what I want to do for tonight, and what I hope for tonight, is that I can arm you to join me in that civic engineering fight so that we can do something great for our local communities and great for our countries. Thank you very much. Stay up here.
Thank you, Robbie. Thank you so much. Appreciate those great words. We got a little bit extra time, and I know Robbie had some great comments. Do we have any questions in the room? Anybody have any questions for Robbie? Right here, yes, sir.
Now that is an interesting question. That's a good question.
That man gets a copy of your book.
It's a good question. I'm not a member. I'm not a Rotarian. I know. Sorry, I know.
He was in.
Hey, look, I said I wasn't that good at the beginning. I told you right up front. I was a Key Club member in high school. That's as close as I got. It's even double bad.
That's right.
That's a double bad. It's interesting. In my hometown, we have 2 Rotary clubs. I've spoken at both of them. I have a lot of good friends in those clubs, but I'm not, unfortunately, a Rotarian. So there you go. Yeah, another question. Oh, this is going to lead to a whole set of questions, I know.
Here, go ahead and sign right here.
So what is your one best tip for changing culture?
My one best tip for changing culture is that it starts, so if you have a team at the top, all culture starts at the top. And that team every day has to act the culture that you want. And importantly, and maybe this is the tip part, when somebody doesn't, you have to fix it and fix it publicly and fix it immediately. People pick up the cue real fast. And by the way, they see the bad acting before you do. And if they know you're not going to fix it, then they don't think it's a problem. And so if you want to fix culture, the senior people at the top have to act it every day. And if that means me telling somebody who works for me in a meeting, that's not acceptable, that's what you have to do. And the person has to be strong enough to accept it, and the rest of the team has to see it. And the minute it happens once or twice, it'll never have to happen again. And people will go, oh, I get it. And things will change.
One last question here with Mike.
Yeah. Sure. The group I work with in Washington, D.C., I'm on the board of an organization called the Bipartisan Policy Center, which was created 10 years ago by some Congress, members of Congress, Tom Daschle, Trent Lott, a few others, who you would have thought of as Republicans and Democrats, but you would have thought of them as people who got things done. They were people who worked to hammer out differences and figure it out. And basically what the Bipartisan Policy Center does is they take policy issues and they will look at it and say, okay, we're going to get some Democrats and some Republicans. We're going to get them in a room, not to compromise, but to actually fight about the issue and really discuss it. And hopefully come up with some proposals from it that everybody looks at and said, yeah, when I do the give and take and I do the fight and I look at it, that's the right thing to do. Then they take those proposals and they work with legislators to get them into law. And they've had a remarkable amount of success, not at the, changing healthcare level, but at specific levels within the organization. Yesterday at our board meeting, they were talking about a topic I had not thought about, which was the bad system we have for human resources in the military. The human resources system in the military was designed in 1946. It's a little out of date. And it creates real tensions and challenges for military families. And this is ground that we should be able to fix. And we should be able to come up with proposals that the Department of Defense wants to implement because it will make our military stronger, enable us to recruit better people, enable us to recruit people for things like cyber terror, where it's not a typical soldier's role, and you have to do things differently. And that's the type of space where you can make change happen. And the thing I will say to all of you about change, just generally real quickly, DC is a bit of a pig pile right now. It is. I spoke with a congressman 2 nights ago who described it in more worse terms, but I'll just use the word pig pile. It's a bit of a pig pile right now. And you shouldn't lose hope because of that. A, because DC will eventually fix itself. I actually do believe that. There are good people there working on it. But the more important reason you shouldn't lose hope is because you don't need DC to fix your problems. Right? You can fix them locally. And so my encouragement is to keep putting pressure on your folks that you elect in DC. That should happen. Elect people who actually think they're there to make progress. But at the same time, don't let that be a reason to wash your hands and get engaged and make something happen yourself.
Thank you, Robbie.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So we do have copies of Robbie's book. We're going to have them in the back. Actually, all the proceeds from, we purchased 20 of these books from Robbie. All the proceeds will go to his foundation.
Yep. All the work goes to charity.
All it goes to charity. And so what we're going to do is to give these out to everyone, whoever wants them. We will sell them, and all the proceeds will go to the Race Across America team. So we're going to be helping out 2 charities tonight.
Perfect.
So
Awesome.
that works out really
That's
well.
awesome.
So he'll be back there signing these.
That's awesome. Thank you. I don't want.
Oh.
Hey,
Hey.
I don't need a copy of the book. I have one.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Robbie.
Yep.